Hi, and welcome to Ward 13 with Connie Van Houten. And
Like Connie tonight, I guess I'm taking, sorry, Connie.
and Jim O'Connell is
Jim
here.
O'Connell,
We've been
yes.
having a lively discussion behind the camera.
Yeah,
but,
which is the best kind, where none of you can watch and hear and listen, and we don't have to mind
He's
our
been
P's
saying
and Q's.
terrible things about our favorite president.
That's not true.
It's like, what was that movie?
What did you just say? What terrible things did I say about our president? Just name one. What did I say? One thing. Tonight.
You compared him unfavorably to the Clintons.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, it was. What was that movie by Dustin Hoffman in 1972? Who was Harry Kellerman, and why is he saying all those terrible things about me? Jim, you're on Ward 13 with Connie Van Houten. You've got to get into the swing of things.
Into the swing?
Hi, I'm
Okay.
Connie Van Houten.
Okay, and I'm not.
It's John Hopwood over here.
So here we are on election night in the great state of New Hampshire. The polls have just closed. We should be hearing shortly about how things have gone. Any words of wisdom about any ideas about, have you the finger on the pulse, John, of what you think might have gone on tonight?
Well, I think Chris Pappas will win.
You think so?
Yeah.
Right, that's a very diverse field. Now, maybe not diverse. That's a very large field of 11. I don't know, but I'd ask the questions. I have to say that I personally support Chris Pappas, but I think I can imagine anybody. I had Mr. Soldati on here on my show one night. What a great guy! I mean, he would, taken at face value from what I gleaned from him and learned from him in that conversation, I think he would make an excellent congressman.
Why? Why would you think he'd make an excellent congressman when in Congress or a legislature, compromise is the currency of getting things done? He sounded, when he's on my show, very uncompromising.
Yeah, well, that's an admirable trait.
Oh, it is?
I mean, pig-headedness perhaps would not be, but starting out, standing for principle and standing on principle, I think is an important thing. I don't
and
have
you wind up on a back
yeah,
bench.
I don't have such a jaded view of politics. I still have the shining city on the hill image.
I started following politics in the 60s as a kid.
Yeah.
And 1972, here we have, right here in Manchester, not far from here, in front of the Union leader, Ed Muskie, senator from Maine, and the 1968 vice presidential candidate with Hubert Humphrey.
Yeah.
And the favorite was responding to the Canuck letter and editorials by William Loeb, and he allegedly cried. Of course, did he or didn't he?
Who, Muskie?
Yes. And if you know your Watergate history, that was part of the dirty tricks of the plumbers. That was Donald Segretti that did that. So,
Okay.
so
So
that's part of politics, right?
yeah, so I know that if you look at sort of the American politics
And
prior
much
to,
changes.
so prior to, there's a sort of a catharsis that happens, and I'm speaking now from something I observed from afar. I wasn't living here then.
1976.
But
That's the first one.
Before we get to Jimmy
Well,
Carter,
we start a little late. We might, if I let you talk, you might get the filibuster.
no, but I'm saying, the difference, sort of trust in government and faith in
When
destiny.
did Americans ever trust government?
Oh, I think after World War II, through to the Watergate/Vietnam period.
You know who Joe Martin was?
Joe Martin, no,
From Massachusetts.
no.
He was the Speaker of House off and on. He
Speaker of the House in
Representatives.
Oh, okay.
And they flipped the House, and Sam Rayburn, the famous.
Okay,
Sam
what
Rayburn
year are
Speaker
we
of the House.
talking about? What years was
46 to the early 50s, because there was a reaction in 1946 against the New Deal and Harry Truman, the Fair Deal.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, people kind of, and there was a reaction against the New Deal that began after the first re-election of President Roosevelt in 1936, with his own vice president, John Nance Garner, who thought he was one to be the nominee in 1940,
right.
started undermining
Right.
Roosevelt and the New Deal, pushed Roosevelt more towards the center, and triggered a recession within the Great Depression. So it's not all,
Well, no.
stuff of greatest generation.
No. I mean, look at Harry Truman and what's his name, Levinson, or no, what's his name? Who did Truman run against?
Well, the first time.
the second time, when he was expected to lose. right?
Well, he
So-
only ran once.
yeah,
for
the first time
re-election.
the
Al-
first time he was after Roosevelt dies, he becomes president. But then when he
Tom
runs,
Dewey, a liberal
Dewey, yeah,
Republican.
because it was
Liberal
Dewey,
Republican.
yeah, and that's that headline with Dewey wins, right? Where they was it the Times or someone had
No, it's
printed
the
news-
Chicago Tribune,
Tribune.
which that was Colonel McCormick's paper, which hated Roosevelt. Roosevelt got horrifying press, was vilified constantly. I still meet older people who think he was Jewish because they used to call him Rosenfeld, and when
Right,
anti-Semitism was one of the coins of the realm.
It's still not. It's not still
And
somehow.
Colonel McCormick's paper in December of 1949 actually revealed war plans, which would have been treason to undermine Roosevelt
Right.
before the war, which was extremely unpopular in the United States.
But my contention at the outset of this, I'm
We're
happy.
talking about politics.
No,
It's
no, yeah.
Americans have always been SOBs that love to fight their government and fight everybody else. you know.
Yeah. Well, my contention is that that's not quite so. I'm saying
Why are you
that
saying that?
I'm saying that there was a change happened, and that at the level of, I think there was always intrigue. Politics by its nature is a combative sport. Some would even say a blood sport. But there was a change that happens in the United States in the when we get to Vietnam and Vietnam into, more importantly, Watergate, where sort of distrust in government, I think, at that moment, from there on, you can trace sort of a growing distrust in government, and
there was
we
always
can
a
see that
distrust
today.
in government.
I think that's part of baked into the American psyche. I think yes. I mean, I
In
think
the federalist system is
right. No.
balance of power.
Yeah, and so I'm not a believer in cycles. I think that
But
cycle.
we're getting towards compromise. FDR wouldn't have got what he wanted without compromise.
Right.
He saved capitalism.
But we
Not
start
by
off to,
being-
we're going. You said about Mr. Soldati
We're talking
that he was
about
the
Soldati.
wrong guy because he wouldn't. He maybe he
sounded
wouldn't
on
count.
compromise.
Well, I think one starts out from principle, and then if one is, I think one has to be pragmatic in the end.
Well, Jimmy Carter, we'll get to that. I was involved in the 1976 New Hampshire primary with my friend Gary Hamer, who's now a selectman, I guess, in Ward 10 on the west side of Manchester. Ray Buckley, who's like 11 days older than me, was with the Jimmy Carter campaign. We were Birch Bayh, the only person that wasn't a founding father that wrote 3 constitutional amendments, including the 25th Amendment, which they never thought that they'd be dealing with that type of disability, but
Yeah.
succession, and the
Yeah.
ERA, which failed. But there were 3. There was Mo Udall, a highly respected, very liberal congressman from Arizona.
Yeah, I
There was
remember.
Birch Bayh, a great liberal, very respected. He was going to run in 72. He was on Nixon's enemies list, but his wife had cancer. I was talking to Bill Gardner about her, because I was just a kid, but Bill Gardner.
Who's been around forever.
Yeah,
And Bill Gardner's got competition for Secretary of State, right?
in
Yeah.
his way. And then there was Sergeant Shriver, who was Kennedy light,
Yep.
but was liberal, and the Kennedy name here in New Hampshire, the Irish Catholic. And then Fred Harris was a populist from Oklahoma that LBJ flirted with putting on the ticket in '64 to harass Hubert Humphrey, because that's who LBJ was. So Jimmy Carter wins, a conservative Democrat from the South, who actually during the presidential campaign said what were called urban ethics then, which means Poles, Italians,
Urban ethnics.
Urban ethics meant that.
Yeah.
That they had a right to the ethnic purity of their neighborhoods. That's what he said during the 1976 presidential contest. So here's a guy, a conservative, who people think, some great liberal, who refused to compromise or deal with Ted Kennedy, it's the Birch Bayhs, the Mo Udalls in Congress, and got nothing and had a disastrous presidency. So he was uncompromising.
Yeah.
and
So
incompetent.
I think the Carter presidency is under review.
It's not under review.
Yes, it is. No.
How could it be? I lived through it. I have books from that. It's a
Right.
disaster.
Mhm.
A botch in Iraq, in Iran, which could have been. He had an incompetent ambassador there.
Right, but
And then
Iran didn't
Then
start.
he brings the Shah of Iran into the United States. What an incompetent.
Iran didn't start on Jimmy Carter's watch, right? Iran was well underway and had been percolating for years before Jimmy Carter comes along in 1976.
I know about Iran.
Right. And
I lived through when my brother was they're getting ready for C5.
So let's go back. So back to this.
But he was a disaster. And
Okay.
my friend Gary said when W was president, says, did you ever think that we would live, and we loved Jimmy Carter, and I'd vote for him again in 1980 against Ronald Reagan, but who was a compromiser no matter what his bluster and everything. So did you ever think that you'd see a worse president than W? I mean, than Jimmy Carter, and now we had W, and now we've topped him. So
Yeah. Well, I think what we have now is
let's
in a whole
not-
new is in a whole new
you don't
category.
need hagiography. You don't need to pretend that democracy is better than it is or history is.
No,
better
no, no, but no, no.
Americans like
Yeah. I think democracy. You know the old adage about democracy. It's the worst system except for the alternative, right?
Yeah, but my cousin, that fiend, Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill, your cousin.
He is 17th cousin.
Wow.
Diana Spencer is 19. And I actually met her father, Earl Spencer, at Althorp. But I didn't know he's my cousin now.
Oh wow. Oh, you
Very
went to
gentle.
Althorp. Well, how long ago was that?
82.
Oh, so prior to Diana. Well, Diana was around.
Well, no,
but
she was the princess. Because they were coming in on a helicopter. We were just, they open up their house and anybody
Right,
can go.
right.
So, little did we know.
So my contention is not that that
Lincoln
politics are
Valley.
pristine and that that everything was rosy and all of a sudden this perfect dish got tainted by Watergate and whatever. I'm saying that that people's. I don't want to rehash the Great Generation thing, etc. The Great
Which is a
Generation, and
bunch
all
of
that
crap.
stuff. I think that argument can be
Absolute
made,
crap.
but there's truth there too, though, right? So,
What?
well,
I just met a guy at the VA here in Manchester, 94 years old, was in the fifth wave at D-Day. And all he's talking about, Jim, is this. I was 18 years old and they drafted me. And they put me and here I am. And he can't get over that he was there. And if you get my father's yearbook from West High, he's a class of 45, and he left at 17. He's in his Navy uniform. And that they actually have an article that FDR said nobody under the age of 21 would be used in combat. But of course, they had to throw them in.
right.
He doesn't think of himself a hero. That's just stuff to sell books.
I don't agree. I've met people who were heroes.
Come
and,
on.
no, I
Audie
don't.
Murphy.
I don't. No. But I'm talking about
former
me.
Miss Sweden that was in a movie with him. He was crazy.
I don't. But so again, like these are all broad stroke stuff, and
That's propaganda. That it's the greatest generation. They were just guys that got sucked into a war.
there is a day that I could argue that the Greatest Generation is overstated. But but there's truth there, though.
How?
Because people.
Archie Bunker was.
There were bad actors and etc. But there were also many Americans who signed up with a will, wanting to, whether they were conned into it or not, or whatever, the image of it or whatever. But they signed up to go abroad to fight evil. And they did so.
Propaganda.
But you and I can argue. That's a separate argument about it was propaganda. Maybe it was propaganda. I'm talking about that people eagerly.
They went because we got attacked at Pearl Harbor.
Yes, very important. That was a
And
very
they
important
they
thing.
were fed propaganda films. My father goes off at 17 and says, I want to fight the Japs on the one hand and the Krauts on the other, and then you're in and you just want to get home.
Right.
And people that are in a war, and a Jock Whitney, who at one time had inherited the greatest fortune, he was an ambassador to the court of St. James under Eisenhower, he was the uber wasp, who owned the New York Herald, which was the New York Times of the wasp.
Right.
And he's in the OSS and in France and captured. And the utter lack of patriotism of the people he was with, they're just there. Jim, after 42, enlistments fell off so much. They had a draft, and they had to draft everybody from 18 to 44. They got my Uncle Hickey, and they had to send him back.
Right.
So,
Yeah, okay. So fine, except that.
except what?
Except what? That
The Red Army that killed
there were millions of Americans who willingly signed up enthusiastically to go abroad, albeit you're saying misinformed, but albeit
How am I
misinformed,
misinformed?
but they went. No, about you're saying
you
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 misinformed.
went on the
You're
test.
saying they were misinformed because of propaganda or something. I'm saying that the difference is that people signed up willingly. I mean, it's analogous to what happened after 9/11, and it's important. Today is an important day. We're commemorating 9/11, and
we?
after 9/11, I am. So the day after in the days after 9/11, there were young people across this country who decided to drop what they were doing, lay down their plowshare, so to speak, and take up arms and to volunteer to go abroad and to take on our enemies. And we saw that Mr. Tillman, Pat Tillman, is one of the example that's most often spoken about from the NFL.
And an endless war over oil.
Well, there you go. But that doesn't take away from the motives and the genuineness of the people who were. Well, it's a moment of it's a moment of patriotism.
They have patriotism.
What?
I'm
You don't believe-
I'm not going to bring up Dr. Johnson's.
You don't believe in
patriotism?
because
there was a patriotic party, and he was talking about that.
Yeah, I always think religion should be there instead of patriotism.
Right,
but
there was a specific party
yes,
he was
yes.
talking about.
But you don't believe in patriotism. So
Of course not.
no, I do, and so
It's bull. I always BS. But they had a thing at the city hall where they're taking the kids, and I think Dave Scannell was part of it and everything. And I doubt he's a veteran. And oh, whoa, you're going off. Why not? You know what those kids should be told? That when they get there for that oil war, so that big Escalade can have oil, they're going to have to kill men, women, and children.
Right.
Do you know what happened? Because Maura Sullivan said, "I fought in Iraq." I was just talking.
Fallujah in particular, she's fond of Fallujah.
We're talking about that, and of course she overstated, but that's something for I had O'Rourke on, who has the Bronze Star.
One of the 11 candidates for CD1.
And all that's determined by statute, folks. I have a letter from the Veterans Benefit Administration. You don't have PTSD because that's determined by statute, and what happened to you? Nothing that, that's not covered by the law. So that's the things you do. But here is.
So you don't get a Purple Heart if you got PTSD?
Why would you get the Purple Heart? You get Purple Heart if you bleed.
Yeah. Oh, it has to be okay. So if you prick your thumb in or out of battle, you get.
It's got to be more than that.
Yeah, I don't mean to be derogatory about it. I'm just wondering where do they join the lines?
And hurt, and they don't get put in for it.
Why?
They're in Laos in 1972 with the Marine Corps, where Nixon says there's no troops there, and that's the MIAs that we was talking about in the 70s and 80s, because the Marines leave their dead behind. When you're left behind there, you don't get a Purple Heart if you're shot, and if you have to kill somebody with a bayonet. But they should tell them, you're going to have to go there, you're going to kill men, women, and children. Children, women, men. They're going to be inching up to that street. There's somebody with a rifle at their back, probably, with an IUD, and you're going to have to take a .50 caliber rifle and blow their head clean off.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to die.
Right.
That's what they should be telling
Right.
these kids.
And
that you're going to have to live that, because that's what Audie Murphy had to live.
But are they not aware of that? I mean, the people
No,
that
not in this BS patriotic.
No.
post
Well, there
9/11 society. Do you see anybody protesting the war or anything?
it does bother me that we've got a low burn, low grade war. We lost a soldier, sailor, marine, which it was this past week. But we lost somebody in Afghanistan this past week. It does bother me that we've got this low grade war going on. But I honor the willingness of people to serve their country. Now they may be mistaken.
Yeah, I can bring in people, Jim, that have the opinion, combat veterans from the Persian Gulf War. Somebody, I'm not going to, because I've had people on the show and Matt's show.
Yeah.
They'll tell you it wasn't worth it, and I can tell you got
No.
people now.
And
It
well,
wasn't worth
Hey.
being in the military.
Well, I'll tell you.
It
That
wasn't.
you're.
And what happened to me was something different.
But I can understand that, because you're a man of literature, and you know that all quite the Western Front and the whole World War
PTSD
One.
is in the Iliad. When they're
Right,
talking
right.
about the noose,
Oh,
that's
yeah, yes.
exactly what happens. It gets you right here.
Right here,
And
yeah.
you go forward. It's like you're driven.
Right, but I'm just saying. So there's no question, but that the futility of war. We see, General Falk in World War One, and the British Army said that he could tolerate up to 5,000 casualties a day.
5,000.
5,000 a day.
50,000
Yeah,
the first
well,
day of the
of
song,
course,
60,000.
Of course, they were all Irish, Welsh, Scottish, New Zealander, Canadian, and Australian, right? But
We live in a country, Jim, which the war to end all wars. It's going to be November 11th, 2018. It's the 100th anniversary of a war that's still memorialized in Britain.
Yes.
And in France, particularly, which they're going to have the parade. And it's utterly ignored here. And that's when the modern era began. both my grandfather and his brother were in combat in France. They were only in combat in the United States for about 4 to 5 months, and they lost 53,000 dead. That's how brutal the war was. So the equivalent of Vietnam.
Right.
And that
mass slaughter.
11/11/18,
the 100th
we'll take
anniversary.
Armistice Day up into the 50s. Kurt Vonnegut, who was a combat veteran from the Battle of the Bulge, said, PTSD guy too, you can tell from the writing, said that day was holy. Veterans Day isn't, when they just make it a generic thing. And that was a Monday holiday from 68 to 77. It was in October. But people like Mike Lopez here in New Hampshire led the fight against that and brought it back to November 11th. Now nobody even knows or thinks about it. Nobody is even going to honor it or anything in the United States. You know, Le Grand Orange, whatever you want to call him, our favorite president, is going to go to
the
Paris
Grand
for a
Orange,
parade, where
that's-
it's taken seriously.
Yeah, it's taken seriously by me because
You're from the British Isles, where people died. In Canada, it is. A whole
I think
village in
Ireland lost
Newfoundland.
thousands and tens of thousands of Irish people were
A whole
lost.
village in Newfoundland was wiped out. It was a Newfoundland regiment. Because
Right.
that was its own, remember, it was its own colony,
Right,
Newfoundland,
right.
Labrador. And it got wiped out, and that's something holy. But in America, it's just, put on a happy face, and let's market the
So you're saying that
stuff
on
like this.
on Veterans Day or on Armistice Day, as we call it, right?
It is still called Armistice
that
Day.
people aren't going to be aware of the
Well,
fact
you're going to
that-
have politicians that wearing a necktie with a flag trotting down Elm Street that never went anywhere near a recruiting station.
right.
But, it is what it is.
Yeah, I still, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that, the futility of war, we've had wars to end wars. I think about the Redcoats, right? The British Redcoats, who, bodies, who were in people shot in the woods of Concord and Lexington.
And people came down from New Hampshire to shoot. Almost related to the Whittemore.
dying at Breeds Hill and whatever, wading through muddy swamps out of Charlestown. But you think about where I talked about this during the first Iraq War, and which is a misnomer because there've been many wars in Iraq,
Jesus.
right? General Gordon of Khartoum, right? Before he lost in Khartoum and surrendered 50,000 troops, he was in Basra. The British Army was fighting in
Basra,
Basra
right.
in 1885 or 1888.
And Lawrence of Arabia was in an RAF plane dropping bombs on Iraq when it's spelled with a K,
Right.
and they were using poison gas when my cousin Winston
so the history
Spencer
of-
Churchill was
Right.
the Secretary of War.
But you I mean, that's, one can take a cynical view, right, and say that all of it was dishonorable, all of it was
It's
fraud,
not that it's
all of it
dishonorable,
was.
it was what it was.
Yeah, so the motives of some who began it, perhaps, who, you think about in the First World War, it's really a war in a very, very simplistic sense between a bunch of first cousins. There are cousins, at least. The Kaiser, the Tsar, and the British King are all cousins. And they'd been together having soirees with each other in the various tourist spots
They
of
look-
Europe.
they look alike,
Yeah,
too, yeah.
and then they just they decide they're going to fight each other. So what do we have? We have millions of people dead as a result of it. So I can understand all of that, but within all, I'm saying that there are
World
people.
War One was the lesson of World War One was the horror and futility of war to enrich the plutocracy and the ammunition and the people that
Right.
made ammunition of it. Look at Britain didn't want to go to war. There was the great paranoia over air power. It wasn't Chamberlain, and it wasn't.
No,
There's
that's
three
World War II.
Chamberlains that are in
Right,
history,
right,
and one
right.
was always talking about, and they were conservatives, and they didn't want to spend any money on defense. Oh, well, they're going to come over and they're going to bomb London because they dropped a few bombs from
Right.
Zeppelins.
Right.
And people were horrified by what could happen. If the United States hadn't gone in 1917, Germany would have won the war. Probably been better for them too, but it would have changed the balance of power, changed the free market system.
I don't think
of
it's
the
clear.
goods.
I don't think it's. I think it is clear
Well, the
that
Kaiser
America.
War in 18.
I think it is clear that without America, the war wouldn't have ended in November of 1918.
In 1917, the French troops revolted.
Right.
There
But
was
so
the Bolsheviks
the
took out
there was so much dynamism in
Right.
Greater Europe by 1917 that it's not clear how it all would have fallen out. We had you had an impasse, a standstill on the battlefields of the Western Front. but,
yeah.
things were still dynamic all over the place otherwise. So, but clearly it was.
But the lesson was, it was a bloodbath that should have been averted. I honestly think that, but for the Holocaust, which I've seen in my lifetime, that theme be developed from. It was developed because it was such a horror to have to deal with, and lots of people that survived the Holocaust wouldn't even talk about it. I was in California with my father, and he says, "See the woman? That's the tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
She was in a camp."
Right.
And the time, even when Sophie's Choice comes out in 81, what was it, 79? Styron's book, which is about the Holocaust, but
Right.
she was a Christian, and turns out that she pro-Hitler and all that as it unfolds. People weren't really dealing with that horror. But I think, but for that, they'd have thought that the World War II is futile in its way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they should have stopped Hitler beforehand, but they didn't.
They didn't. But again, so we started off by me saying that, like, the people who got on boats, mostly boats back then, and sailed
I
across.
think we're talking about Lincoln Soldati. He was a veteran, by the way.
Yeah,
he never
yeah.
talks about it because
Yeah, a lot of veterans I know don't because it doesn't need.
you don't talk about it because the people. Morris Sullivan is the new class of what was known from 19 through the Vietnam era, when veterans became something quite different. A professional veteran, the $1 million wound that you get that takes you back to a political career.
Right.
And there's a movie, In Harm's Way, John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, great movie, Otto Preminger, where this great stage actor, what was his name? O'Neill. He used to have a bar, and he was a notorious alcoholic. He used to have a bar called O'Neill's Balloon down there, Lincoln, the Lincoln Center. But he plays this congressman, because a lot of congressmen joined up, including Henry Cabot Lodge II, who
Right.
had a distinguished career. So many that FDR said, no, you can't go off,
Right.
or the government's going to shut down. They have him, and the vice admiral, who's wary of John Wayne, who's just become a two-star, saying, "You're going to go there. You're going to go into the combat, and you're going to be my spy on his staff." He says, "Oh, well, what?" He says, "I haven't been trained." He says, "You come back with a Purple Heart, and you'll get another 100,000 votes." And that's 1965.
Right.
When people all went through that machine. You think of the great novels of World War II are written by Mailer, who the contempt he has for officers.
Right.
James Jones, the great Catch 22, which is really about McCarthyism,
Right,
but it's
right.
World War II also. That's the great novel. That's what the military is like. It's insanity, and what's it for? And other great novels. But
So
there's
how do you
nobody that was pro.
How do you marry that? How do you marry it's sort of the military the militaristic history, right, of sort of the Prussians or the Germans
Well,
or the
the
British?
were never as militaristic as the Germans. You had
Right.
your navy, but
Right.
the army was its own core.
Right, but you had all
aristocrats.
yeah, but there were aristocrats. You had all the great regiments.
But
right?
you see, Nelson would never have been able to rise in the
Admiral
army.
Nelson, to anybody who's still paying
Right,
attention.
and but he would have, because he was a yeoman.
Yeah.
But they so valued the navy that anybody of ability could rise. As long as you weren't.
Right. So it was a meritocracy.
Right,
Whereas the army was absolutely not.
And that was a disaster for the British in World War I and World War II. Well, they lost so many good people in World War I. World War II was...
Right, and the gap between the two is so short.
Yeah.
The distance from 1918 to
Jeez.
19 for them 1939, right? So
Yeah.
it's think about it like this is we were talking earlier on about 9/11. It's 17 years since 9/11.
Wars always seems to be with us.
And 21 is it's just slightly more than well.
How can you
Yeah.
lay down arms in a world like that we have? Because, the United States after World War I, that was a volunteer army. There's the United States Army was always a small cadre, and it was never like, even in the 20th century through 1941, more than like 100 or maybe a couple 100,000. Because our founding fathers, from going through, coming here after the Cousins War in the 1600s in England,
Right.
and then we had a Cousins War here in the United States. But they were very wary of a large standing army as being a threat
Right,
to democracy.
right,
But that
right.
comes from Rome, Sulla, and then Caesar.
And we have, if you want to jump around some more, we have the Russians today began
jeez.
their Operation Vostok. It's called Operation East. So Operation, and they're saying up to 300,000 men with thousands of Chinese and some thousands of Mongolian troops on exercises in Siberia today.
So I would like to, live in a world where you have a small military, and we don't live in the world of skullduggery and secrecy and the NSA.
Well, we have a small. I mean,
how can that?
I mean,
be?
with today we have not in terms of money by any stretch of the imagination, but we have a small military in terms of numbers, and it is becoming automated, etc. Right?
$700 billion a year, Joe.
And growing. The military-industrial complex, right? So,
well, we had our history lesson.
We did. We covered a lot of ground. I
think Chris Papst would. But you wanted to talk about what happened at Central High School on Friday. You were talking about it in your.
Oh yeah. So well, the short version is there was unfortunately some young man lost his life, was shot on Hanover Street at somewhere around 11 o'clock Friday morning. The shooter, they're still looking for today, was thought to have or was seen entering a house on Hanover Street, a couple of blocks from Central. And so the SWAT team was called out, and they had that house cordoned off because there was a line of sight from that house to part of Central. Central was locked down. You'd be careful about the terms you use because there's something to stay in place. There's lockdown. These terms have real meaning for students about what thing they do. But ultimately, it means the students all stay in they don't move through classes anymore. They don't move around the campus. They're in the room.
Something that would be unthinkable on West High, 1977.
And undoable.
Undoable, unthinkable. Geez, half of us would be skipping. So, he wouldn't even be in the building.
So I put aside the issue of whether that was just whether the call by the police was right or not, making the presumption that it was, because it's the fact is we decided to do that, and that people who have more facts than I have available decided that it was the right thing to do to keep them there.
A highly dangerous person.
Yes,
and if a student gets killed,
it always seemed to me a little problematic, to be honest, that we decided to keep students, because in the end students weren't they were bussed out of the building at 8:30 at night, so it was dark, etc., etc. So I thought it was a bit strange that we waited until it was dark to move kids. But I'm not going to second guess our police, and I hope that there are some lessons learned on and all the rest of it. But in any case, the story is that the students had to remain in place at Central High School, and as the day went on, they ended up there from 7 a.m. until 8:30. And even then, they were still being released at 9:30 and 10 o'clock before they got out. So it was 14 or 15 hours for some. So from the city's point of view, the fact that we had so many teachers and administrators, and the MTA had to find bus drivers and the cafeteria
cost
staff.
must be tremendous.
Well, I'm not thinking about
But
cost, I'm
what's a
thinking about
life?
effort, right? I'm thinking about the effort that was put in and the coordination of it, and they made it all work, and everybody was safe. And they didn't lose any kid, and no kid went berserk and all the rest of it. And, it's a very diverse population, so it was wonderful to see teachers there and principals from West High. Mr. D. Sharp from West High School was there, and people from Mr. Forrest Rendell, the principal of Parkside, and Benny McCafferty from Hillside. So lots of people showed up. These are our public employees from our public schools who showed up and were working there. And we did make the contrast that with no disrespect to the police officers, there were some police officers there with the SWAT team. There were some police officers there directing traffic. The police officers who were there directing traffic were getting paid overtime, time and a half, maybe got to double time by the time the day was over. And so they were on what, $100 an hour by then, maybe, or I don't know, $80 an hour or something by the time you get there.
Jim, when they started boosting the cops' pay, not just in Manchester but other places, let's say starting in the 90s and so, it was so that they wouldn't graft as much, because there was the Knapp Commission in New York. I mean, we got the great film Serpico and The Prince of the City, and Rudy Giuliani made his name busting the cops that we're doing that.
So my point has to do with the teachers not having a contract and working for free. So
they're not working for free.
They were working for free on Friday night.
They're not being paid?
No.
They're not getting paychecks?
No, they were getting paychecks to work the job they're paid to work, which according to some in our city would be that teachers get paid to work during school hours and
But they're on salary. They're not an hourly employee like a cop.
So there was no teacher could have been requested legally. They could have been requested but there was no legal reason for any teacher to comply with any request by the city to come and work in the schools at 5 o'clock on Friday. Right? So there's no basis for that. They came in and did it for free. They're not going to get a dime extra for doing it.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. Weren't there teachers in Central High?
Yeah, they got, yes, and their job finishes at 2:53 p.m.
So, what do they can't go out of the building?
No, I'm not. That's
But
fine.
they can't go to the
But no, you're like picking pieces out
Well,
of it.
it's
What
true.
about the teachers? What about the teachers who volunteered, left their homes?
But they're volunteers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's exactly what.
Well,
they
you
are.
volunteer, Jim, not to get paid.
Right.
You know, that's not about being paid.
So
Should they get combat pay? Because you do
Combat
get
pay?
combat pay.
No, no.
Well, the
I'm
fire
just saying-
department wants combat
I'm
pay.
just. I'm just saying.
You're
the
highlighting something that's
The
interesting,
teachers do not have a contract, right? We learned this past week that the average pay increase in the state in the United
Mitch Gerard
States
doesn't want them to.
is 2.9%. It's what the average pay increase for all jobs in the United States was last year. Now, you'd imagine that people with degrees and people who are educated might have had a higher increase on the higher end of that average rather than the lower. But even at the minimum, it's 2.9%. And the school teachers of Manchester
Jim, it's supply and demand.
gets here. No, the demand is there. We've got empty teacher positions we can't fill. That's the Joe Kelly
Well,
Levasseur argument, who
Well,
says
they
to
can
me
go
that
they can go somewhere to another community that will pay them higher.
and they do, and they have been.
So, yeah. But I don't see why you think a volunteer. You're conflating two issues, which would be, you could make a legitimate argument that they deserve a better contract or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But it's a
They
poor.
deserve a contract first because they don't have a contract right now.
And there's an
And
interesting.
they deserve a better one.
There's an interesting that you can say that in my generation, no teacher was ever considered to be in the line of fire. You know,
That's true
which
too. Yes.
I lived in Danbury, Connecticut,
Yeah.
and my neighbors went through a horrific massacre of children and teachers. Which, if this ever happens to your community, you have no idea the horror of it.
Yeah.
You don't.
Please God, nobody ever will.
And anybody that would criticize the lockdown or whatever, it's like if you read about the death of Officer Briggs, the perpetrator says, "Oh, I just put the gun behind me and started firing." Now that might have been true or not, but he's trying to say he didn't have the intent to kill him, so it's not
Right.
first degree
You got
murder.
an amazing shot,
But-
a headshot, right?
But if
Yeah.
you've been around, weapons, bullets have amazing. Bullets can do amazing things. It always astounds me. And I've been around since I was a kid.
Trajectories
Not
of
anymore.
bullets, right.
Oh yeah, I always said I was going to get shot when I had to do. I ran a lane and a firing. Oh, jeez, let's not get into that.
So let's not.
Nothing to do with combat.
Yeah.
But yeah, bullet. If somebody just comes out, and fires, ran into that
Right.
could go.
But can we just go back to just I want to make the point strongly about the
cops,
fact that
got,
city of Manchester does not value its teachers, and it's a
But what-
major problem
but what city
economically for the
does?
city. Well, this is true, but some value them more than others, right? You only have to drive around the state and go visit some of the school buildings and go visit with some of the teachers, and you will see the difference. And the difference is
They're
there.
good teachers and they're bad teachers, Jim. They're teachers that volunteered out of civic duty.
Yeah.
It's always going to be like that.
Right.
You can't pay for that.
To
I
be-
mean, you can't incentivize that. I mean, you could incentivize a soldier to join a combat unit. I
Right.
guess.
So my point that I'm just going to make, because I don't want, we're not staying with it.
And we
which
need to
is-
go on to some other
Yeah,
thing.
my point is just that the city of Manchester needs to actually come to an agreement with its teachers and to pay them adequately for the job they do. And I don't think any teacher is saying, I want to get paid for last Friday night. I haven't heard that from anybody. I'm using it simply as an example of the contrast between a public employee who's there getting paid, overtime with benefits, and
'cause of
a-
their
and-
contract.
and people who are not. And it sort of highlights the difference that we have between one public employee and another.
But Jim, there's a movement in this city, and it's got a lot of traction now that Rich Gerard seems to control 7 votes on that board, which is enough now to control the board, and on the board of the school committee, that you're going to, the public schools are going to be let to rot, and you move your precious darlings
So
into
I
private
don't.
academies.
So first of all, I don't know anything about Rich Gerard.
Does he have 7 votes? He seems to have 7 votes.
Not that I know of.
He seems to control 7 votes. After the show, I can tell you a tidbit I found out from sources.
So I know
He defied.
He has-
He defied the city solicitor He's got 7 votes to do that because Nancy Tessier's not on the board anymore.
Well, Nancy Tessier resigned from the
Right.
board, right? And she will be replaced by the alderman at the next meeting. So I don't know anything about Rich. I'd be amazed if Mr. Gerard had 7 votes on that board.
He does. He did have 7 votes. How did he? He used it to defy. No.
So anybody, on any given day, any person can get 7 votes in favor of a particular topic. I mean, so that doesn't say that there's a sort of a Rich Gerard block or something. I don't see evidence of that.
I do.
Okay, so maybe I'm not reading the tea leaves correctly, but yeah, and I don't believe that
Maybe you want to look at the world through Gerard-colored glasses.
I doubt that. I think Mr. Gerard would disagree with you.
He's a notorious liar, and I can say that because he's lied about me.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know. I'm just saying that I don't know anything about. I'm not trying to avoid him, but him having, it would amaze me if there is a sort of a block of 7 who say whatever Rich Gerard wants, we're going to do that. I think this is a diverse board. I think there's lots of. It's not diverse enough for me, but it is. I think it's there's a wide spectrum of opinions there. I think it is true to say that it is much less predictable than other boards. Of the previous boards, right? That where it was more predictable how people were going to vote on any one issue, and I also.
But there's this attack on the public schools.
The attack has been going on for years. I wish it would come out in the open.
But I've seen it. I've lived in Boston. I've lived in New York.
Right.
I've lived in California, where the schools are allowed to deteriorate, and then you put your precious dollars. Well, they had a scam in the liberal places I lived called magnet schools with certain criteria, so you could put a cordon sanitaire.
But let's be okay. So with all I argue constantly for better resourcing for Manchester schools. But I also look at.
Is a big thing.
I also look. You can go to vouchers in a second if you want, but I also look at the numbers. Say the numbers of kids per classroom in the city of Manchester. I don't know what the numbers are. There were some tentative numbers released to the school board for last night, but the numbers of kids in our elementary schools, for instance, the size of classes in our elementary schools have gone down each year for the last 2 years. The additional $2 million that the board mayor and alderman gave Dr. Vargas was spent to reduce class numbers, and I'm expecting when we look at the class numbers, I'm still not satisfied. But I expect when we look at the class numbers for this current year that we get the snapshot on October 1st, I expect to find that the class numbers in our elementary schools are lower than they were last year.
What do you think about, you had this campaign circle about SB 193. What do you think the future is? Was that vouchers?
That's vouchers, yes. So the thing is, Governor Sununu.
I didn't know Evander Bolden was a great progressive.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's her. That's this lady, Barb. What's her name?
Baby. Stand your ground.
I don't know about her politics. I'm just saying that
and
SB.
Christopher Herbert, who constantly gives me lectures on what it's like to be a Democrat, which I've been for 40 years. Which is 36 more than him.
So, House Bill 193, the sad news is that Governor Sununu says it's back up, he's bringing it back up, and he's going to continue his attack on public schools. And so, Governor Sununu bothers me a lot with regard to education because he's like a sheep in sheep's clothing. Which I think sort of well describes the man, but, the appointment of Mr. Edelblut and and then, having Drew Klein from the Josiah Bartlett Center as the chairman of the state school board, and the continuum of Trump, Vos, Edelblut, Sununu, Edelblut, down to Drew Klein, the whole hierarchy of decision makers above the public schools is made up of people who are basically trying to dismantle the public school system. But this fight's not over, and this fight hasn't even really begun. I still think that the majority of members of our school board will stand up for our schools and do the right thing, and I expect our aldermen to do the same time.
But to do what? What does that mean? I mean, I don't follow it as closely as you do.
So
I
that,
only
that,
look
that,
at
they-
things
that
like
they,
from
that well, when
the
when
inside baseball type of
right.
stuff.
So the fact is, Senate Bill 193 was defeated, and by a narrow margin of 5 votes, but it was defeated. and did
Barbara
not become law.
Shaw voted for it, did she not?
She did, and I don't understand, why she
I
did.
think,
I mean, there were
you
some
have to go a
political
little
reasons.
inside
yeah,
baseball there,
little inside
Rob.
baseball. But again,
Historical.
that's yes. So again, but here's I'm not such an innocent, but when people say.
he isn't as much off air as
Yeah. But no, like
he has
like,
property, so that he doesn't want a libel suit.
No, it's not that. I know. Well,
I'm just teasing.
No,
you.
I know that. No, I definitely don't want a libel suit. But that wouldn't, sort of truth comes first in my, speaking truth to power and being truthful, and honourable are very important
Yes,
things.
you can't sue Rich Drug because he doesn't have any property.
He
That
doesn't.
insulates him.
I thought he has. I thought he lived over near me.
Well,
And he has
Bassett
a.
told me that.
He has a. Oh, really? I
It's
know.
all in his wife's name, I guess.
Is it?
I
Okay,
don't know.
I-
Joe. Joe the night told me that.
Yeah.
Joe told me many
I don't. So I don't know, but I just know that 193 was defeated, and it was defeated by good people working hard to do the right thing. And we've got lots of great people. And that's why I hope people voted tonight. I hope the right people got elected. So we have reasonable people in the and we
State
elect them in
legislature?
November. The state legislature's got to change. We need people in the state legislature who will stop voting against Manchester.
What about executive council? Who do you think is that a toss-up between Garth Corriveau, the former alderman
And-
from
and,
Manchester,
and
and Gray
Chenoweth?
Chenoweth,
I
who's
think
a high-tech exec?
Yeah, so it seems to me like a toss-up. I'd love to know what's going on, where the money was and how much money was spent.
Well, Gray gets his money from. He's wealthy.
No, he
himself.
is. I know from the sale of
believe.
what. No, but I'm saying like where was that money spent?
5 minutes.
And then the other thing is,
But when one of them beat Ted Gatzis, Mr.
Right.
Sunshine himself.
well, so first of all, so the idea that when WMUR spoke about last night when they were prepping, like sort of priming people for the elections today, they didn't touch the executive council. So it's one of
Nobody
those.
really cares.
Yeah, but it's such an
It's such
important
a-
position.
yeah,
it's
it's
critical, and so
Contracts are vital.
I don't know whether.
And-
I don't know who's going to run, but you're either going to have Gatzis versus Corvo or Gatzis versus Chenoweth. So this is a Manchester versus Manchester thing. It'll be interesting to see, what legs Ted Gatzis has. His run for the governor was disastrous.
He almost
So-
came in fourth,
Right,
which propelled
right.
Jeannie Forrester
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Frank Edelblut
He was-
to high office.
Yeah,
one
he-
in the Republican Party and the other
Right. So-
as the head of the education.
So it's going to be interesting to see. I think that's going to be a generic vote thing. I don't think that. I think that the Gatzis name is known in Manchester, and there's votes to be gotten here. Not as many as there used to be, but there's some here. And then I think district wide, it's going to be Democrat versus Republican, and
Yeah.
whoever comes out. I don't think that, with all due respects to Chenoweth and to Garth Corvo, I don't think either of them has the name
Right.
recognition. And I think Gatzis has problems with sort of his history.
And it will depend on whether they got the guts to take him on over what happened at West High School, which is, when you
And-
think about what's going on in Bedford and the
Right.
outrage of the community over something not even similar, but
Right,
in the vein that takes place in Exeter, and here, where might as well be Stalin's Russia or something.
Yeah, well, people just don't pay as much attention.
It's not that
right?
they don't pay attention; they have real fear here.
Yeah, you think?
People don't want to be harassed. People
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
be. When I got sued, that was a
I know there was
sign to people.
there was a time in Manchester, and I spoke to some public representatives about this in the past. There was a time in Manchester where public employees were afraid to speak out about some of the things that were happening in the city
Oh, yeah, 'cause
because of
they-
the vindictive nature of their political leadership. Just
Oh,
put
yeah.
it that way. People who were, and we know, that people were taken aside and told, "Don't forget who brought you
threatened.
to
I
the
was
dance."
warned that if I took on Gatzis, he would come after me, and he came after me before that, but in
Right,
different
right,
ways.
right.
So that's just who he is.
I'm hoping that
He's a street fighter.
yeah, I'm hoping that sometimes you need street fighters. I don't think
And
we need
you'll
a
have
street
to
fighter.
kick him in the Yablacos
Yeah,
to you.
I don't think we need a street fighter in the executive council. We need wise council.
rid of Ted
Yeah. We need to make smart. People have to recognize that New Hampshire is now a changing place that's dynamic and
has to change with the
yes,
times.
it must, and it has an opportunity to do that, or it can sort of fall back into some,
Yeah, because I'll just say, I understand when they're talking about the high tech industry is talking about diversity. It's a particular thing, and we don't have the time. We only got like a minute left. It's a thing. It's about, because so many, and you know this, so many great programmers and IT people are from India, from Asia,
right.
or Asian or that,
Right,
and
right.
you have a community that's
right.
supportive and all
Right.
that.
If you take the non-nationals one, if they're called who live in New Hampshire today, there are large numbers of them living in middle-class suburbia. People think about non-nationals as somehow being a drain on the economy. The non-nationals in New Hampshire are often wealthy, well-to-do, high earners living in expensive homes in middle-class suburbia.
Okay, Jim, do you have any fun? I know you're one of these, the cup is half full type of people, where with me it's already been spelled.
So you know what? Some people.
1 minute, Jim. You only got 60
Some
seconds.
people wouldn't recognize that when I go back and I keep talking about Manchester needs to do a better job, and we're cheap and we've got to do
Too bad
better.
that we weren't more people that
Yeah, well-
thumping the tub.
Well, we'll keep fighting the fight.
We gotta go now.
We gotta go.
We don't have any time.
All right.
Thank you. And when we come back, we'll tell you about all the glorious victories
What happened
of
today.
the chosen people.
Good night, folks, and
I mean, chosen
thanks
people
again.
that we chose.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
we
yeah, our chosen
ballot.
people. Good night,
Bye.
folks.